Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Technician Roundtable for the devised theater show, Brighter Days. I'm McKenna Koffel, one of the dramaturgs, and I'm going to be running this. So we're going to start with Haley introducing herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Haley Rodee, and I was the publicity head for Brighter Days.
Next, Mercer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mercer. I'm the costume head for Brighter Days.
Hello, I'm Bill Nallen, and I am the lighting designer for Brighter Days.
Hey guys, my name's Kate Tabor, and I'm the stage manager for Brighter Days.
Hello, my name is Emily Morvant, and I do props for Brighter Days.
Hi, my name is Julia Gear, and I also do props for Brighter Days.
Hi, my name is Damian Middleton. I'm the director of photography for Brighter Days.
Hey everyone, I'm Alexis Holler. I am the hair and makeup head for Brighter Days.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Stonecipher. I am the sound designer for Brighter Days.
Hello, everybody. I am Seamus Doyle, and I am the set designer for Brighter Days.
Okay, and now we're going to go on to our questions, and we're going to start with Haley. So what did you use as an inspiration for the show, and how did you come up with this color palette?
Awesome. Thanks for the question. I first looked at a varying range of different publications. So I knew that I wanted to start with kind of the Statue of Liberty being like a centric role in kind of how the production looked and kind of the color palette as well. So as soon as I thought of the Statue of Liberty, instantly I thought of The New Yorker, which is a magazine, if a lot of y'all don't know or aren't familiar with. And it's basically a magazine that's aimed at elite readership, but it's for the purpose of middle-class Americans to kind of who want upper-class aspirations. So I kind of felt like that tied perfectly with the whole aim and the base storyline that we had started with originally. So that was kind of my first starting point. And then from there, I kind of went crazy with all my different ideas and kind of went off the rails to kind of just put the color scheme that I thought would look really cool and somehow incorporate it with the theme that we had already developed. So from that, I met with a production team, which included Seamus, and we had hilarious discussions of how much we love the band idea. And that was kind of like off the rails at first, but we actually looked into the Grateful Dead band. And although that's kind of like odd and kind of random, we somehow found a way to incorporate it into the same ideals that we had developed previously. So I don't know if y'all know, but Grateful Dead is like a pioneering band. They kind of did like, they were known for having various influences, but kind of it coming together to a diverse whole. And if you know anything about immigration, that's kind of how it is. And especially in America, like that being the whole melting pot idea, which is such a cliche, but we use it so often. I feel like that's a really big driving force in this production. So kind of incorporating the Grateful Dead into this, I then went into the color palette for that. And although it was like crazy colors and none of it matched, I was like, wow, I could really do something with the structure and the design of this. And so I took that and then I created a shirt from like those basic color designs. So here's a shirt that I created and it has that graphic band tee look. Here we go, round of applause. But a lot of the stuff from this, especially this black and white image, came from just a lot of historical referencing. I know I personally took APUS history last year and we really went in depth on a book called How the Other Half Lives by Jacob Riis. And I know some of y'all are nodding your heads, but I kind of went back and reflected on that moment in my life and realizing those graphics and what stood out to me. And so those black and white images now took a different color and a different form. And so from using those black and white images and bringing those to life, I tried to revive it with that band appeal. And so having that band appeal look, I then took it on the back and you can see that there's very much a green color and coat. So that's that. I don't know if anyone has any questions regarding anything I said, but.
Does anybody want to add anything?
Can I add something?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I know a lot from me over the years, especially because I do a lot of makeup. and I've done like costumes and designing, I use Pinterest as an inspiration, but also not just to like look at ideas, but overall color palette and structure. Did you use any of that in your designs?
Yeah, we actually all started. I know most of us, the production team, we kind of had this whole joint process of curating that together through Pinterest, just because it had so much of a graphic appeal for us to kind of visually see everything take place. So I know a lot of like our boys got on Pinterest for the first time, but it was kind of that huge thing to navigate it together and looking through those different color palettes and color schemes. So those who were involved with that, we had kind of a fun time looking at not only historical references, but just seeing like the art in fashion and the art in colors and bringing that aspect of that band grunge look into a more historical referencing. So it's kind of just like reviving that. So Pinterest did act kind of as a nice platform for us to kind of mend and merge those two ideas together. Thanks for reminding me of that one.
Anybody else? Nope. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Mercer. My question for you is, what was your favorite character to design your costume for?
So designing the costumes as a whole was a lot of fun, especially researching the 1910 times period. But I specifically really enjoyed doing Wiley/Thomas's costume because he's a firefighter. So I had to research like period firefighter uniforms. It was really neat seeing how they evolved over time, and like with a hat and everything, and just getting to learn about all that. And I also really liked designing his like his more just like working class clothes, because I think those are really cool personally, and like what they wore back then is really neat. But it was fun experimenting with colors for like the suspenders and pants and everything. And I'm just overall proud with how everything turned out.
I don't know.
Anything?
Yeah, here, I'll add something. I don't know if this is just you, but how do you feel like the production, having that general like foundation that we established helped help navigate that costume process? Like, how was that for you coming onto a understanding that like foundation kind of, and like having to experiment with the stuff that we provided and then coming out with stuff on top of that? Like, what was
honestly, I think it helped because I kind of had like a background to look at, to base things off of. Even with the color palette thing, there was one established, so I could like base things off of that and experiment with that. And since I knew kind of like who the characters were, and like from what I saw, I was able to base what they wore off their personalities and what they do in the show.
Okay, now let's move on to some lighting design with Bill. How did designing lighting for a show that you hadn't seen a script for yet, how did that go?
Yeah, so it was definitely an interesting process because, usually whenever I sit down to do lighting design, I usually sit down with the script first thing and read through it and start to develop an image in my mind and write some stuff down. But obviously that was not an option for this time, so it was definitely interesting. It definitely required a lot of communication between the writers, dramaturgs, and I, and talking about what are we looking at for like setting and different locations and obviously the time period, and we're looking at tenements. So then once we're all on the same page, and that can change sometimes. I start yeah, people always say we have like, you won't believe the amount of information you have at your fingertips. Well, you can literally look stuff up. And so, I was looking around on the internet, looking at what lighting kind of looked like in the tenements, some of them original pictures, and which were, not the easiest to look at for lighting, but maybe some of them are, present day replications of what in museums. And so there was a lot of research in that, and, what kind of lighting fixtures, where the light came from in these kinds of settings. Like, these places, didn't have a lot of, today, I guess we can really put lights wherever we want, but, they weren't necessarily well lit. So, shadows could be a huge thing. Warmth, definitely, because you're going to be either using, warmer lights or all the way down to lanterns if need be in these situations. So it was definitely a feat, but I think we did a good job at that. So.
Okay, now let's move on to the amazing SM of the show, Kate. There were so many people and moving parts throughout this process. How did you manage everything and stay organized?
So I feel like the best thing for any show process is especially like having pretty clear communication throughout everyone, and especially having these different groups that were meeting at different times. It was very important for me to keep a report for our rehearsals and making sure to update that and getting everyone to check it regularly so that way they knew like what was going on in the other groups. That way we were all on the same page at the same time. And as soon as I found something out, I'd make sure to tell the other groups so that we were all on the same page and no one was left behind or like didn't hear about something and things got crazy. I also think that so for the show, we had a Google Drive folder that had everyone's information in it that we could all see. And that was very important for collaborating throughout the different groups. So it was nice for the set designers to go look at what the writers were doing and vice versa, just in general, making sure that everyone was on the same page and that they were able to collaborate as easy as possible.
Okay, now we're gonna move on to Emily and Julia. Emily, let's go, you'll go first. What was your favorite prop for the show?
So for this show, we were able to find an antique sewing machine from the 1910s. And this was definitely my favorite prop because I think it was really important to represent the time period. And like at this time, a lot of people would work like 12-hour days in little sweatshops in their homes. And so having a sewing machine that was accurate was really important to us because it's something that like their days and their schedules like rotated around. So that was definitely my favorite prop.
My favorite prop would have to be the tomato pincushion. It's a little weird, but through a lot of extensive like research and that me and Emily and McKenna have done, it was really interesting to see that this is a product that we use today and hundreds of years ago. And to me, that was like such an eye-opener to see like things stick and like even messages of the show stick throughout hundreds of years. So, yeah.
I also want to elaborate on what Julia just said really quickly because I think it's really interesting that she pointed that out because I know in the show's early like production phase, we talked a lot about legacy and like what that would mean in the show. So I think that's a really interesting element how like Julia realized that like, oh, like even her props element like had that same continuation of legacy.
Now let's go on to the filming portion of the show. Damien, how did you adapt to the filming process through COVID guidelines?
So in the beginning of it, like it was probably June, July, we didn't know what it was going to be like. There was lots of talk of it actually being like a Zoom call, There was another one where we were literally going to have people in their houses filming themselves. And then we were going to cut it together. Like Bill, Daniel, and I, we all made like how-to videos to like help the people learn how to like film. It's crazy. So it definitely got a lot easier and a lot more simple when we were filming on stage, but with following the COVID guidelines, that kind of complicated some stuff up. Like we had to adapt to like a hybrid model where if the actors were going to be kind of close together, we wanted to avoid that. So we would film them one at a time. But if the actors were, let's say, were distanced, then we could set down 2 cameras and we made it a lot easier. So thankfully, most of the show, they were able to be apart so we could film it with just 2 cameras instead of just using 1. But we definitely kept the guidelines in mind when filming.
Yeah, I bet filming was pretty hard during that whole experience throughout the summer. I mean, you can't imagine what was going to happen at the beginning. Now let's move on to our makeup and hair head, Alexis. What was it like having to deal with these last minute changes, and how did you overcome them?
Hey, so I honestly really like last minute changes. I think it really shows your creativity on the fly. And I think it's really exciting when something is like, you need to change it this way, or you yourself is like, you see it on camera, you're like, I'm gonna change that. So normal shows, we have things very set in stone. During our production meetings, we always like, especially because we plan so early in advance, because with our normal shows. With this show in particular, it's very different. Even though as a writer and I've been involved in the process since the beginning, I didn't know how filming was going to be. I didn't know how I was going to be able to do the makeup and hair. And it was almost up to the last minute of how much I could do. Thankfully, we had some leeway that I was able to help and do some of the makeup and the hair themselves, but I actually had to teach a lot of the actors how to do it, which is really exciting. In a normal show process, I don't get to do that. So just going back to your original question, I know I just kind of veered off there for a second. Just being ready to showcase your creativity and your intelligence within your field of expertise. And I think all of us can attest to last minute changes, that it really showcases how like much work we do put into our fields of tech with our last minute changes. So I really loved the process because of that. So yeah.
Alexis, I was wondering, what was it like knowing that the camera was so close to people's faces? Like, how do you have to change the makeup for that? Because normally, like, they'd be in the audience pretty far away. So what did you do for that?
Well, this is what I would do, but this is my initial thought was I hope they invest in some skincare between now and then. Your pores are going to be, I don't mean, and no one has bad skin, but your pores are going to be up close. But I think that actually causes, it makes the footage of the people more raw. I try to do a little bit less makeup, of course, not just a lot less makeup, because people in the tenements weren't glamorized. They were hardworking middle-class people who went through a lot. There's a lot of destruction, there was a lot of death within their environment, and there was a lot of grime. They're not going to be perfect, and they're not going to have a perfect complexion. So I kind of just try to emphasize age and wear and tear, but not try to add too much product to it. So yeah.
Okay, now we're gonna move on to Daniel, our amazing sound person who wrote a whole score. How was it writing that?
Well, yeah, I probably should have specified at the beginning of my introduction, aside from all the sound design stuff, I did at least attempt to make some compositions for this show. Really my first time as a composer, so I've been figuring things out a lot throughout the process. And the process has had to change a lot since pre-production back in the summer. In those earlier months, I really wanted to do like a style of a soundtrack that really focused on instrumentation, which is basically essentially what instruments you are choosing to use and when. So I wanted each character to have like their own little theme, their little leitmotif that could be reprised every time they were on screen. But maybe in a different context, like maybe it's a flute for the first time and then a more emotional scene, it's a French horn, but it's the same little melody, or maybe it's major, maybe it's minor. It's a little lazy, admittedly, but it is really cool, and it creates that familiarity. You hear it and you hear it again in a different context. That's not quite what happened because of, a lot of last minute changes to the script and, deadlines. So what really happened a lot was I would just have to sit down, and honestly, a lot of my ideas for melodic movements, melodic lines came from shower thoughts. I'm not ashamed to say that. This brain right here can come up with some amazing stuff under the right circumstances, I should hope. So I would take those melodic lines and I would think about them. I would think about them a lot. I would sit down and here next to my piano, or even at the school, I would sit down at a piano whenever I could and just try to test things. Not necessarily think about like all of the theory behind it, because admittedly, I did not apply a lot of my musical theory knowledge for this. I really winged it for a lot. So, but there were a couple cases where I would sit down and just kind of try to figure out a chord progression, see what I could make sound nice and not too dissonant, if that makes any sense. The product that I have been able to produce, I am quite proud of, though. I hope it sounds not too much like stock music.
Daniel, I know that you composed a lot of music for the show, but what did you have to do with Foley? I know that was also a huge element that we incorporated into the filming process.
So, Foley art, yes, another part of sound design. Again, in the earlier months in pre-production, I was thinking this is important. If we are making a film, this is like priority number one for sound. Every footstep, every little bit of clothing rustling around, every door, every furniture creak has to get picked up. And I was praying to God I wouldn't have to dub it over in post. And the system we came up with, albeit I'd say it was a little janky, we hid floor mics in the set and we worked with 2 boom mics to capture dialogue. So we had 2 boom operators moving back and forth to try to follow the actors as best they could. Meanwhile, the floor mics were just gathering general room ambience, which, yes, would pick up their voices too, but it really, really helped to pick up on the footsteps and all those little tiny details. So the main work for Foley has actually just been dubbing in like someone knocking on a door when they enter, or like a bottle of pills falls down, and in the film it was plastic, but it's supposed to be glass. So we replaced that sound with glass, that kind of stuff. So it's actually been a lot less work than I was initially anticipating.
And Daniel, quickly circling back to the soundtrack.
Yes.
I'm sure people are wondering how you produced it. Were you able to like get an orchestra together, or does that genius mind, perform all the instruments itself, or like,
oh man,
what do you got going on over there, man?
So, I mean, yes, I do play a fair amount of instruments, but no, actually none of it was recorded live. As I said, this is my first time at it. I am a high schooler novice. I don't think I could have gotten an orchestra together for this, especially with the global pandemic going on. So it was all produced in a little piece of software called FL Studio. FL Studio is typically used for EDM, which is electronic dance music. That's not this soundtrack. So I used the industry standard for the professionals is a piece of software called Pro Tools. Not a professional here though. I used FL Studio out of necessity, but I was able to find some free orchestra plugins that I think sound very good because they did, in fact, sample a live orchestra. So it's about as close to being live as I can get with everything going on in the world.
I don't know, I raised my hand. I have another thing to add to that. Do you listen to a lot of composers, or what's your favorite type of music to listen to, or does a certain type of music inspire you to write and compose?
Okay, well, my favorite music is probably stuff by Led Zeppelin. That's not this. So my inspiration though, I was listening a lot to soundtracks by Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman just to figure out when and where they enter the scene, because you don't always need music everywhere. Sometimes music is too intrusive. So I was really trying to, my initial plan was it'd be like this underscore, and I've really been dialing it back because you don't always want music, if that makes sense. But inspiration would come from them for like how they do their orchestral movements. My big takeaway, I absolutely love stuff from Interstellar, and the Danny Elfman Batman theme of all things. That's a great one. But as far as inspiration more specifically, I also would borrow little melodic ideas from old symphonic pieces I played from my days in band. They're obscure enough, I remember them. I think maybe 2 other people might remember them. Like, oh, that's from that piece right there. You put that in there.
I would
That's
love
what
to
they all have
chat
to
with
say.
you about Danny Elfman composers. That's awesome. Or composition. That's awesome though. Go you.
Okay, last but definitely not least, Seamus. What were some challenges that came while trying to adapt to social distancing and leaving the room for cameras while also maintaining historical accuracy when building the set?
All right. Sorry, that was a little slow. My Wi-Fi is a little shoddy. I've been popping in and out. It's been kicking me and all of that. I apologize. But
Wait,
so
Seamus, before you start, I think that it was bad on all of our ends, so I'm going to go ahead and reread the question just so that everyone can hear it for our
okay,
audience
thank you.
as well.
Yeah, all right, cool.
Seamus, your question was, what are the challenges that came with having to adapt to social distancing and leaving room for cameras while also maintaining historical accuracy when building the set? Seamus?
All right, thank you. All right, so first I should start off by saying this, that when we started the show, we didn't know if we were going to film it, if it would be available on stage or anything. So everybody here who's talking on what they've been doing, everybody else had a completely different plan before all of this started, and I would like to give everybody props for that. That's a little joke, props, for that, because everybody here, like I had 4 or 5 different scenic designs, all set for COVID standpoints in different ways that we were going to film or be on stage and such like that. As far as what we ended up with, it was a film set. I took a lot of inspiration from scenic designers on Broadway, namely Beowulf Borrett. I hope to God I am not butchering his name, but he was the scenic designer for Come From Away. And I really love the kind of differing and textured look of that. So that was the original idea for the stage. That was the base idea for me. And then we moved to film, which is completely different. But I was still able to use that as I was able to use the walls, and I was able to use everything to kind of create this world. I'm creating a world, I'm creating a room, which was amazing. Another problem was the fact that tenement buildings, the whole point of them, I mean, the reason that these stories are told is because it's amazing that these people were living in these rooms that were this small, that were the size of your closet. Whoever's watching this is closet, which is insane, but obviously we can't do that with COVID. So I had to rely a lot on the AV team because I had to build a set that was large enough to fit people in that are 6 feet apart. But a lot of those tenements were not even 6 feet wide. So I relied a lot on the AV to make it look smaller, as well as props to add stuff to my scenic design to make it look cluttered and all of that. So yeah, that is how I created that historically accurately. I used walls, but it was all the AV who made it look small. There we go.
So Seamus, how did you collab with, I guess, Publicity for color design throughout your set pieces?
All right. So me and Haley were in. Is it slow? Is the connection bad?
You're totally good. It was just
All
Kate
right, cool.
being present for a sec.
Okay, thank God. I keep thinking it's me. So as Haley stated previously, her and I worked a lot together early on and throughout as part of the production team, and we came up with a general. We found a lot of pictures, a lot of New Yorker pictures is what I based a lot of when we were on stage, my set off of, that kind of textured look. But throughout the entire thing, when we found out it was film, when we found out we were doing the show and everything, Haley and I have been working together on colors and just general vibes, straight up, just straight vibes. We were trying to find the vibe of the show, and that was our job. And it's kind of hard when the vibe of the show is lying on your shoulders, but you don't have a script, which was pretty difficult. But we were able to do it, and I was able to use those colors and that vibe to kind of create the set around that.
And I also just want to bring in having that said with Seamus. Like I remember one specific instance, we kind of just made lots of jokes, but on top of that, we had this whole model and discussion around the texture of like the set, because we both kind of were like wood versus brick and like seeing this whole thing mesh. So it was kind of nice, like although I'm not set geared or driven in any way and like I have no like real skills for that, it was kind of awesome to kind of partake in that with Seamus, just because I saw it from like a different angle. I feel like, I don't know if Seamus felt that way, but like it felt cool for me to kind of just bring that element to the design, keeping that design thing whole with our two parts.
Yeah, I think that was cool. And it was cool seeing Haley's perspective on things as well with Publicity. Just being able to see how the vibe of the show is directly related with both of those things. And as far as, I'm going to talk on the Grateful Dead thing, I was the one who brought it up to Haley because she was looking for something to bring to the directors, and I was like, what about the Grateful Dead? And then she found reason behind it more and more in her research. But I found like the whole point of the Grateful Dead is it's this like, I'm not a big psychedelic rock guy. I don't think anybody here is, you know what I mean? It's a very specific kind of music. But like Haley said earlier, it was a lot of like music coming together. It's jazz and it's orchestra and it's classical and everything that just comes together to create this like interesting music. And that is kind of like New York City in the 1910s. So as far as set design, when I use that to help me with set design, whenever I thought about taking an artistic liberty, which was basically being like, no, historically that's stupid, I want to do this instead, I would think like, does this fit the theme of the show of people coming together? And a lot of times it did, and I was able to create that like separation of rooms and how they did that and all of that, which was really cool. So yeah.
Okay, and our last question of the roundtable is, what is one thing you hope the audience takes away from the show? Sorry.
I'll go. I would like to for people to take away that amongst anything, we were able to put something on. Behind the scenes, I mean, it was a grind and it was a struggle. And I mean, if you are doing a show later on, anybody who is a technician later on, and you think, oh, the directors are throwing this my way, throwing that my way, you have no idea. Imagine like thinking you're going to do this on stage and then them being like, okay, well now we're going to film it, right? I mean, we literally had to come up with two plans, and we literally could have made two shows in the amount of time and the amount of effort that we gave. And I really hope that shows through the screen, that the hard work that everybody had to put forth.
And also just like art being able to exist in the midst of chaos, you know, like having that whole energy that we create. Like there's just a different appreciation for the art now that we like are in these circumstances. And I know that also like towards the beginning, we talked a lot about when establishing what story we wanted to tell, like the idea of coping and like finding that element. Like we wanted art in a sense to heal us, you know what I mean? And like all this stuff. So I know that this is like a very normal thing, especially I think it's funny because like a lot of artistic revolutions and everything still like fit that. Like there's that art element and that beauty in such like disaster. And so it's kind of nice to have this element be like our whole positive energy, I guess. Like it just really alleviate a lot of that. And also for our community, like we really hope that this kind of is something that is that stable thing for a lot of our community to watch art and like view it. So
I want to go.
Oh, you can go.
Sorry.
You're good.
So I've been thinking about this. I think what we did is really cool because this really hasn't been done before. And this is going to sound mean, but I've seen a lot of other clubs and it's the same thing. They have basketball, it's just basketball. Football, it's just football. We took a bad situation and then changed it and did a completely different thing. Like that hasn't been done before. I don't see anybody else doing it. Every other club it's banned, but it's outside. This is like, we did theater, but we made like a movie. like, this is really impressive. Like, we wrote it, we like, Daniel made music for it. I mean, it's really cool.
We're artists. Like,
No shade to any of the other clubs, but
I was gonna say something. I just didn't want to interrupt anyone. And I hope I'm unmuted. Okay, I'm unmuted. Good. I really think, well, bouncing what of Haley was saying, I just had a thought. Like the whole Renaissance was after a period of like the Dark Ages, and it was an abundance of art. And I really think, and also what Damien was just saying, I think just being a catalyst for not only just change, but creativity showcases just how passionate we are. I just really think it's cool. So I'm just really excited for everyone to see the show, to be honest. So not anything big brain thought, but I'm just excited. So
Yeah, and and tagging off of what some of what's already been said is, yeah, it's like it's just so cool that we took some like theater and took a bad situation, made a film. We had a plan for like 2, 3, maybe even 4 different situations. But not only that, but like it wasn't just we took a play that was already written and figured out figured all these other things out. It was this is like 100% of the artistic creation of this group of people, and that's just fascinating. And it's like I think that's just something that is something to be really appreciated in all of this.
I think that also the fact that we're high schoolers is pretty incredible. Like putting all of this together, the directors really let us go and do what we wanted to do. Like someone would come, maybe like Daniel would come up with an idea and present it, and then be like, yeah, if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. Like they were so open to our ideas, which was super fun. And it was very interesting, like in the earlier stages during the summer, during our Zoom calls or like different group calls, all of our rehearsals were on Zoom, by the way. Like at the beginning of this, for like a couple months. And we wrote a script on Zoom, which I think they'll talk about in the writer room, but I thought that was pretty awesome for high schoolers to do that. Also, like, just in general, there were so many ideas being bounced off, and especially from my perspective as the stage manager sitting in on these meetings, it was super cool for me to like see how they were colliding together and the groups didn't even know. And then like I'd go tell another group and they'd be like, oh my gosh, we literally were thinking about that. So I just think it was cool how like we all collided and collaborated on this project.
Anybody else want to add to that question? Okay. I just want to give a huge thank you to everybody who is in tech for the show. Not everybody, even everybody who is here and everybody who is still helping out tech, even if you've only been here for a little bit. Thank you. This is the Technician Roundtable.